Senator steps down. Minnesota Democrat Al Franken resigns amid sexual misconduct allegations. Plaudits and protests. President Trump's decision on Jerusalem is good news to his supporters, but fuels rage in the Middle East. New leaders. Pope Francis names 2 archbishops, one for the capital of Europe, the other for the world's largest diocese. And let there be light. The Vatican unveils its fully decorated Christmas tree in St. Peter's Square. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, December 7th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Minnesota Senator Al Franken resigns amid allegations of sexual misconduct brought to light 3 weeks ago. Correspondent Jason Calvi was in the Senate chamber when the senator made the announcement. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Senator Franken calls today the worst day of his political life. The Minnesota Democrat did not apologize and said little about the women making the claims that led to this resignation. He even pushed back, saying some of the allegations are simply not true.
Let me be clear. I may be resigning my seat, but I am not giving up my voice.
With 8 women now coming forward accusing Franken of sexual misconduct, the senator from Minnesota says he's stepping down. Yet he calls himself a champion for women.
I've earned a reputation as someone who respects the women I work alongside every day. I know there's been a very different picture of me painted over the last few weeks, but I know who I really am.
Franken joins a growing list of powerful men losing their jobs because of sexual harassment allegations.
These really are not apologies. They're excuses. They're rationalizations.
I asked Catholic scholar Mary Rice Hassan what's at the root of these scandals. She blames the sexual revolution.
So it corrupted the meaning of sex, and then it threw out objective morality. So there were no more constraints on people's behavior except what they wanted to do or what others would consent to. And so that's the sort of the matrix that we've been operating under.
Hassan says the public can learn from the Catholic Church and its teaching on human sexuality, and only then can people take responsibility for their sexual misdeeds.
The definition of conversion is you acknowledge your sins and you change your ways. Taking on yourself that sense of saying, I did something wrong, and what I did wrong was to offend my Creator, to offend God, to offend the way things are supposed to be.
On the floor, Senator Franken also slammed President Trump and GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore, both men accused of inappropriate allegations as well. Now, Minnesota's governor will appoint a temporary replacement for Franken, and one possibility is a former Planned Parenthood executive, the current lieutenant governor of the state of Minnesota, Tina Smith. A special election is planned for next year. Lauren?
Capitol Hill, Jason Calvi, Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. President Trump meets with congressional leaders trying to strike a deal to avoid a potential government shutdown. Democrats have another priority. They want to protect dreamers from deportation. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Democrats and a few Republicans have suggested they won't vote for government funding without legislative protections for hundreds of thousands of young, undocumented immigrants known as dreamers. So what's the president's response? I posed that question directly to the White House principal, Deputy Press Secretary.
Is the president willing to do something to support the dreamers now in order to avoid a government shutdown?
Well, look, that hasn't been our stance. I'm not going to negotiate with you and with others on television, but we don't think that an insistence by Democrats on immigration legislation to be attached to must-pass spending bills, especially when they're in the minority, makes a lot of sense.
Shaw says we need to fund the government first, then worry about other issues. He tells me the president's priorities on immigration don't just focus on the future of dreamers. They also include border security and interior enforcement. I asked if the president needs the U.S.-Mexico border wall in order to support a solution for the dreamers. Shaw tells me he'll leave that to the president to decide. Ahead of a weekend deadline, Speaker Paul Ryan suggests he has enough votes in the House to keep the government funded for 2 weeks. And in the Senate, although many Democrats are likely to oppose the short-term bill, enough votes are expected for the bill's passage. But the issue of how to help the Dreamers isn't going away. Congress has a March deadline to come up with a solution before the DACA program expires. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. The first and second ladies of the United States meet with Hurricane Harvey first responders in Texas. Melania Trump and Karen Pence surveyed recovery efforts in Corpus Christi and Rockport. The two spent time with students at an elementary school impacted by Harvey. They visited a food bank to help sort donations for those in need. The Category 4 storm in August damaged or destroyed around 200,000 homes and flooded much of Houston and the surrounding communities. Palestinians close schools and shops and call for protests in a furious response to President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson defends the president's decision. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary Tillerson says President Trump is merely recognizing reality in his announcement. He says Jerusalem's final status is still up to Israelis and Palestinians to work out, but the initial reaction in the region has led to violent clashes. Hundreds of Palestinian protesters take to the streets for a second day, this time fighting with Israeli security forces in the West Bank. The leader of Hamas, a terrorist group in the region, is calling for an armed uprising in response to President Trump's recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Protesters in Gaza, an area controlled by Hamas, torch American and Israeli flags. These Palestinians see President Trump's decision as an act of war on Muslim holy sites. Palestinians turned off the lights on Bethlehem's Christmas tree last night. The tree stands in front of the Nativity Church, the birthplace of Jesus, according to tradition. Secretary Tillerson addressed security concerns at similar sites as he visits Vienna.
The status quo on the holy sites must be maintained, which recognize the rightful role of various countries around those sites.
The U.S. State Department is warning Americans not to travel to parts of the region where there are protests. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims the decision as a victory.
Jerusalem has an extraordinary history, and over the millennia, you can actually cite a few significant milestones. Yesterday's statement by President Trump, I think, is such a milestone.
But the Palestinians want East Jerusalem, captured by Israel in 1967, as their future capital. The city is sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
Now, tensions are not as high as in other parts of Israel. The mayor of Kiryat Yam in the north, for example, says he will name a park after President Trump, saying the president took a brave, unprecedented step. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital is putting fear in the hearts of many Catholics living there. The region is already rife with conflict. For more on this, we turn to a Catholic priest who has lived there for 40 years. Joining us now via Skype is Jesuit Father David Neuhaus in Jerusalem. He is with the Pontifical Biblical Institute there as a professor. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
We've seen riots, we've seen people praying in Jerusalem over the news. How chaotic is it right now?
Well, at the moment, I don't think it's full chaos yet, but we are very, very worried. Tomorrow, of course, is Friday prayers for the Muslims. And yes, we are very worried about the human price that might be paid for the declaration of President Trump yesterday.
Many world leaders are saying this decision by President Trump could destabilize the region, and I think that's what you're hinting at. As someone who lives in Jerusalem, do you believe that could happen?
Yes, I think that every time the subject of Jerusalem is touched, there is the danger that things will explode. The Holy Father yesterday expressed that fear very, very eloquently, and we are very concerned once again that words that we don't quite understand, intentions that we cannot fathom, are going to cause situations in which people lose their lives. Today has already been a very momentous day with lots of demonstrations everywhere, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Gaza, Ramallah. And we are very concerned because I think we don't quite understand what the intention is. We don't know what's behind these words and where we are being led.
Are you fearful for your life?
No.
Okay.
I'm not fearful for my own life, but as a teacher here in the country teaching young people, I'm certainly very fearful for the lives of those I teach or their friends or anyone who is like them, who feels passionate about Jerusalem. And once again, Jerusalem is a city that arouses a lot of emotion. People feel a deep, deep sense of belonging to Jerusalem. And the statement made by President Trump last night seems to imply that some people belong and some people don't belong. And there seems to be a change in the discourse of the international community. At least President Trump seems to be trying to bring about that change. And that is very worrying to everyone here.
Jesuit Father David Neuhaus, professor at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Jerusalem, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Bolivian lawmakers eased the country's restrictions on abortion despite strong opposition from the Catholic Church. The new law says girls up to the age of 17 can abort until the 8th week of pregnancy. One church leader says the ruling, quote, encourages genocide. Previously, abortion was only permitted in cases of rape, incest, or if the mother's life was in danger. Father Maurizio Palu, twice kidnapped in more than a year in Nigeria, is now back in that country. Father Palu spoke to us last month about his 5-day ordeal. It says the Virgin Mary saved him. He's a priest in the Diocese of Rome who was inspired to become a missionary after hearing St. John Paul II say, quote, Africa is the future of the Church. And Pope Francis appoints archbishops for 2 important world capitals. Monsignor Michel Aupeti is the new Archbishop of Paris. He was a doctor specializing in bioethics before being ordained a priest at age 44 and is a leader in the pro-life movement. Cardinal Carlos Aguiar Retes is the new Archbishop of Mexico City, the world's largest diocese, with 7 million faithful. EWTN's Dr. Matthew Bunson tells us why they were promoted earlier in their careers by Pope Benedict and are well equipped to serve the Holy Father.
Both of them also, however, represent the vision of Pope Francis for the Church today. Both of them are well trained. We have, of course, in Archbishop Aupeti, a doctor, and we have in Cardinal Aguirretes, a scripture scholar. But both of them are intensely pastoral figures.
For a closer look at the new archbishops, including an article exploring their backgrounds, visit National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. At least 32 fishermen are dead following a cyclone off the southern coast of India. A local priest says the dead were all Catholic. More than 200 people are also missing. Cyclone Oki was the first to hit the region since 1941. The affected area is predominantly Catholic. Coming up, a lack of faith. We discuss the national crisis over sexual harassment through a Catholic lens. And a Pearl Harbor hero. A Catholic priest who died in the attack is honored 76 years later. A federal judge in New Jersey is weighing whether to scrap a state law barring religious cemeteries from selling headstones. The Archdiocese of Newark filed the lawsuit. It won a ruling in 2013 allowing it to sell those headstones. The profits paid for graveyard maintenance. A ruling is expected early next year. The American Civil Liberties Union is pushing back against a claim by the Trump administration that attorneys acted improperly while helping an immigrant teenager held in federal custody obtain an abortion. The Supreme Court has been asked to throw out an appeals court ruling for the teen who remains in federal custody. The recent flood of sexual misconduct allegations are proof that people in power have lost touch with morality. The scandals have exposed an unpleasant side to politics, Hollywood, and the media. As I write in a story this week for the Federalist website, sexual misconduct is fundamentally about power, However, the dirty deeds also thrived in an atmosphere of immorality, in a business that worships celebrity and sex appeal, but barely covers religion. To weigh in on these cases of sexual harassment from a Catholic perspective, we are joined by Dr. Gracie Christie, Policy Advisor for the Catholic Association. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
I have noticed in all of these apologies, including the one today from Senator Al Franken of Minnesota, who resigned, that they don't mention their faith. Nobody does, and there could be many different reasons for this. Maybe men aren't religious, maybe they think faith shouldn't be brought into this type of conversation. What are your thoughts?
I think you made a wonderful point in your Federalist piece. I hope that all your watchers are going to also Google that and watch and read it, because you, I think you have a very interesting perspective being a woman anchor and also working in a place like this studio, like EWTN, which I absolutely love.
So do I.
Because it's a place of propriety, of decorum, of real respect. I feel a real sense of mutual respect between the people that work here. And that should be repeated everywhere.
The mainstream media is a really cutthroat business. You know, I've heard locker room talk. I've been in this business for 25 years. And, you know, it's tough to reconcile some of the things that you say and hear and the way people are asked to dress with faith, with Catholic faith in particular. It is about power, but as a working mother, a radiologist, and a Catholic, what do you make of this latest crisis in our society? Are we really that morally decrepit?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, I hate to be so negative, but the fact is that we are creating a culture of complete sexual license, and then we're surprised when people go to work and bring that culture to work. How can we be surprised?
How do you think we forgive and move on if we don't change the tone and the direction of this conversation? It's likely just to become a witch hunt where we continue to say, gotcha, 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 gotcha. But what's next? Is forgiveness going to be part of this?
So a witch hunt atmosphere is the worst thing that could happen, because the sexual abuse will continue, the ugliness at work will continue, and some people will lose their jobs who shouldn't have lost their jobs, who were innocent, I'm sure. But yes, forgiveness, and then a change, to look for change where people, every TV studio should be like EWTN.
Well, aren't you sweet? And it's completely different here, atmosphere, than at any other place that I've worked, and that's why I love being here. So thank you so much, Gracie Christie, Dr. Gracie Christie, for coming on our show and for being part of our extended family.
My pleasure.
A standstill in LA as wildfires burn near freeways and the Getty Center. Mandatory evacuation orders have been issued for parts of Bel Air as the fire approaches homes in the area. The Skirball fire has burned more than 50 acres as Santa Ana winds continue to create dangerous conditions. The destruction comes in what has been already the worst year on record for the wildfires in the state. Today marks the 76th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Several American ships were destroyed on that day, which will live in infamy. Thousands were killed and even more wounded. President Trump signed a proclamation this afternoon recognizing National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. And a Navy chaplain and Catholic priest is given the Silver Star 76 years to the day after his death. Father Aloysius Schmidt earned the honor for helping 12 sailors escape a sinking battleship while giving up his own life in Pearl Harbor. According to Navy archives, Father Schmidt was hearing confessions aboard the USS Oklahoma when 4 torpedoes struck. The priest made his way to an open portal and helped shipmates escape, giving each one a blessing. One of his relatives told reporters, "Our hope is that this is just the beginning of the story." Up next, oh, Christmas tree, oh, we are at St. Peter's Square as the Vatican unveils its holiday decorations. And the gift that keeps on giving, how Habitat for Humanity is using last year's Christmas tree from Rockefeller Center. The saint, for the bees. Today is the feast day of St. Ambrose. He was the Bishop of Milan, Italy, and is a doctor of the church. Several of the hymns he wrote are still a part of the liturgy today. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. All right, sorry about that. At the Vatican, the 90-foot tree in St. Peter's Square is alongside a picturesque nativity scene from Naples. Earlier today, we caught correspondent Juliette Lindley just at the perfect time. Juliette, what a beautiful tree. Tell us about the decorations. Who made them?
So these decorations that you can see behind me on the tree are handmade by 2 sets of children. Now let's first say that the tree comes from pretty far away. It comes from northeastern Poland, from the Diocese of Elk, and it was trucked down, and it's 20 feet high, and it was trucked down in a huge truck to get here. Now the decorations are made of ceramic, and on it the children have put sometimes just little drawings, but also messages. Some messages are rather touching, like a little boy who says, I really want to be better and not have to take medicines anymore. Another one that says, I would really like to have a new tractor for my family in the earthquake zone so that we can continue being farmers. And then other ones on a lighter note, like, I really want to be a ballerina, or I really want to have a Ferrari.
Okay, well, wow. All right, I don't know if that's going to happen. Let's talk about the religious aspects here. The concept of the nativity scene began with St. Francis of Assisi in the 13th century, complete with live animals. Is there a nativity scene right near that tree?
There is a nativity scene right near the tree. It comes from less far afield. It doesn't come from Poland. It comes from central Italy, the Avellino region, from a monastery there. There are no live animals, but there are 6-foot-high figures of the different persons who make a part of the nativity scene. But they also include, apart from the Virgin Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus and the 3 kings, you also have figures representing the theme of mercy. So we have the theme of visiting the sick, and we have a gentleman lying sick with his foot bandaged and someone helping him. We also have housing pilgrims as a theme, and there is an elderly lady helping a dark-skinned gentleman, clearly a symbol of our need to reach out to migrants and what Pope Francis has often reminded us to do.
Now, I see the tree hasn't quite lit up yet behind you. We were hoping to catch it live on air. What time do you expect it to happen?
It should be happening any moment now. Lauren, maybe I can just tell you that the Pope this morning met some of those children from the cancer ward who had made the handmade decorations on the tree out of terracotta, out of ceramics, and he told them that now that their dreams that they had written on these decorations are up on the tree, that they would be a little closer to Jesus, and that Jesus would greatly recognize what they had written.
Oh, how lovely is that? Thank you so much, Juliette. We'll have to show. Oh my gosh, it happened. Turn around.
What, you see? There
Turn
you
around.
Go. There
Look
you
at
go.
that. That's amazing. See, God was with you on that timing.
Just in time, Lauren.
Okay. Thank you, Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thank you, Lauren.
And that's because we're with EWTN, right? It is not just the Vatican getting into the Christmas spirit. Capitol Hill held its annual tree lighting last night. Ridley Brandmar, 11 years old. He's a boy from Montana, and he helped Speaker Paul Ryan with the honor. Senator John Tester of the Big Sky State nominated Ridley to light the tree. The 6th grader lost all of the fingers on his right hand in an accident. Now, this 79-foot tree is from a national forest in Montana, and it's decorated with more than 12,000 handmade ornaments. Finally tonight, have you ever wondered what happens to a tree after it's taken down? I know mine goes on the street and then they come and pick it up. I actually have no idea what happened to it. But the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree in New York keeps giving long after Christmas. Every year after the holidays, the iconic tree is milled into wooden planks, and then Habitat for Humanity Homes uses them. Wood from last year's tree can be seen in homes in Newburgh, New York, 50 miles upriver from Manhattan.
I love seeing it arrive. I love seeing the stamp. I love knowing that it was part of this tree that brings such joy.
Habitat for Humanity has been using wood recycled from giant trees for a decade. Homes in Philadelphia, New York City, and Mississippi contain wood that comes with a special Rockefeller Center stamp. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.